When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how different will the book and the show ending be. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow and reach our people that like this content as well. And let's get into the video. So, how different will they be? I think very different. Now, I think certain plot points will stay the same, or certain endings may stay the same, or maybe the show is kind of like roughly, yeah, this is where characters may end up, but it's just going to be way different how they get there. Because there are a couple of key things I think you have to remember when we're talking about how the series is going to end as a whole, right? Stannis is still alive. The whole northern plot is completely different than it was in the show. So the whole idea that the books are going to go the same as the show, or a general kind of thing they're going to go the same, is just not true, right? And I think if you look at even the timings, how long things have to happen, I don't believe we're going to have this whole season, like, or I guess whole series of events where we almost have a book worth of just Jon and Dany interacting and then falling in love and all that stuff. I don't see that happening because it just, you don't have time. Like, the only way that's going to be possible is if Jon just leaves the North after wins, like, really quickly to go to Dany, but then it just, so for me, when you look at the books, it's going to end up way differently. I think certain things like Brienne becoming the king is something I definitely think could happen, and I could see that, you know, continuing to play out. But even Bran's story, I think, is going to be completely different. I think Bran is actually going to use his powers and kind of have some value to the story, whereas in the show, he really didn't have any value to the story other than just being bait. And kind of just sitting around looking weird and having weird dialogue. And just be kind of using Bran as this weak, not weak, but very kind of someone that spouts exposition and is just there to progress the plot, right? And even then, he wasn't very good at that. So I think a lot of is going to be different. And I think if you look at how the show was received, I think it also will probably play into George's mind that a lot of people didn't like some of the things that ended up happening that maybe he did have planned that he's going to change. So I think it's going to be vastly different. If we look at how King's Landing's plot went towards the end of the show, and how a lot of our main characters there got wrapped up with, you know, Jaime and Cersei and all these characters, I think it's going to be vastly different. I think the Lannisters will mostly be taken out by Fagon, or at least imprisoned. Fagon, who isn't even in the show, I think is going to be a very big player in the books, as in he's going to be kind of the one that Dany has to defeat to get the throne, and I think, you know, she will. But I think it'll be one of those things where right after she takes the throne, the others have, you know, made this attack where maybe they've taken the North already, and they're kind of, all the forces in the North are being pushed back to the neck. Who knows? We just don't know at this point. There's, you know, we still have 2 books out, but I think there's going to be multiple conflicts with the others. I don't think it's going to be one big battle where Arya kills the Night King right off the bat, and that's it. The conflict's over. I think this is going to be maybe multiple battles, or it's going to maybe have one big battle that ends up going really poorly for the living or whatever. And the forces of the living, you know, with Jon, Dany, maybe all these forces, when they combine, realize we just aren't strong enough to defeat them, and maybe they end up having this kind of pact. Or maybe we see maybe one battle in the North where the forces aren't united. The second battle, maybe they get united, and after the second one, they still can't win, and realize that they kind of have to make this pact to end this war of the living and the others. And that's kind of how that whole thing plays out. I just don't see a lot of the same plot things happening. I feel like how we saw with season 5, where they combined 2 books, I feel like it's kind of what we're seeing with later parts of the show, where the later parts of the show was them trying to get to the end very quickly, just combining things that don't happen. Something I want to point out majorly is Arya killing all the Freys, right? In the show, that's what ends up happening. In the books, that's not what's going to happen. I believe Lady Stoneheart is going to get that kind of role, and I think Arya will come in, but I think she will actually kill her mother, Lady Stoneheart. So I think when you look at a lot of these plot points, they're vastly different. Even the stuff that we had, that the books, you still had information to do, was different in the show. Brienne, right, is someone who just wanders around, and it really is not useful. I really don't think she's even that big of a character past season 4. So when you look at all those kind of ideas where Brienne in the books, yes, she does a bit of wandering around, and sometimes her story is not the most interesting. She gets to this point where now she's with Lady Stoneheart. She's probably going to have a, at least a reunion with maybe Arya. I think, or not reunion with Arya, but meeting with Arya. And I think when you look at how the story is going to end in the books, it's going to be a lot more detailed. We're going to have way more, built up stories, right? And character arcs. If we're looking at Dany, let's say Dany goes, crazy, right? And I'm not saying she's going to. I think it is plausible that George could build the case to maybe she goes crazy, because there's a lot of things you could still do with using Aegon to kind of mess with Dany's mind and all that stuff, and using maybe Barristan's death, because he's kind of a father figure at this point to Dany, and using Tyrion to kind of push her that way. He could definitely do it. He could also not do it, and it'd still play out very well. To me, it's just everything will be more threshed out whenever we do get the books, if we get the books at all. I think things will make sense. We know George, when he does write, is very good at writing, and I think the problem is just getting him to finish the stories and stuff like that. But when you look at all these things, all these characters have to kind of start merging on each other, and that's what we see with Dany. Dany has kind of attracted a lot of different POV characters, a lot of main characters, a lot of maybe side characters to Dany, right? And we're kind of seeing where there's really a three setting type thing right now, because Arya should be leaving Braavos one way or another. That plot will be completely different, in my opinion. I've made an Arya video if you guys want to watch that video. I will try to remember to link it in this video. But basically, I don't think she's going to be in Braavos much longer. So I think that whole area is going to get eliminated from the plot, unless Dany revisits it and kind of for maybe her conquest of Essos before she comes over to Westeros. And then I think you have really what Dany's doing. So I think Dany and Winds will be kind of finishing up all her stuff in Marine and Essos and all that stuff. And then I think the end of Winds of Winter is going to be her coming over into Westeros. So I think you're going to have Dany's kind of faction. You're going to have what's going on in the north, I believe, is kind of be a big one. And then I believe probably by the end of the book, you'll have more or less Aegon's kind of faction in the south. You also have a little bit of the things going on with the Riverlands, which I believe probably by the end of the book is going to be figured out, right? With Lady Stoneheart, Arya possibly entering the Riverlands and killing her mother, maybe by the end of the book. With Brynden Tully still there, with Edmure. I think all of that is going to be kind of wrapped up by the end of the book, and we'll kind of either start heading north or the fighting is going to come to them. So I think that's kind of how you look at it, where you have three factions where that's where a lot of the focus is going to be within the story. And I think if you look at kind of how the show did it, it felt very rushed. It felt like the others who were this big threat throughout the entire show and or books got eliminated very quickly and very underwhelmingly. I think there's going to be something very different. I think when we start getting these battles with the others, I think every battle we're going to lose characters that we like, or characters that we know of. And I think by the end, there will be this big kind of sacrifice maybe that the living have to make that kind of satisfies maybe the others or something like that, or they have to do something just to get rid of the others, as in defeating them. So I don't think this is going to be a good happy ending for the story, right? Because if you look at the show, this is a pretty good ending. Everybody really gets what they want. I guess the only people that don't are really major supporters of Dany. Like Grey Worm and the Dothraki don't really get what they want, but everybody else is a fairly happy ending for. I mean, think about the characters that really die in season 8 when that's a major, chapter, or not major chapter, but major season and all that. It's a pretty happy ending when you think about it. And I don't think that's going to be the way it is in the books at all. I think it's going to be very gray, where you have Bran possibly becoming king, where, you kind of have some Children of the Forest things going on there. Is Bran really Bran anymore? Is he being controlled by the three-eyed, Raven and stuff like that? So I think it's interesting where I think we're going to get into this idea that maybe the throne and Westeros as a whole is actually being controlled by, the old gods and the Children of the Forest and all that. And that's kind of been their plan throughout the entire book series. And that's what ends up happening, which is definitely would be a very kind of bittersweet ending, as well as we see other characters where maybe they don't get as good of endings as maybe we think. Maybe if Dany lives on, she kind of gets a bad ending, or I think she's going to die personally. But what if, we have some of these other characters where they don't get great endings, right? Where the story feels very, we lost, but we won. Like, us winning this war, was it worth it, right? Like, what did we achieve while losing, right? And I think that's going to be a big question, because I think if you look at the War of the Five Kings and we look at this war with the others and all this has been going on, I think if you look at the families of the higher families of Westeros and we look at the common folk as a whole, think about how much you would have lost in this time span. Right, with houses, I think are going to be either on the brink of collapsing, or they will go completely extinct. I mean, the Tyrells, right? They are a house I think is going to go almost extinct in the next 2 books. I have kind of predicted in my small council and who I think the king is by the end video that I believe Loras Tyrell may survive, but I think the rest of his family might be destroyed. I think the Dornish have a great chance of not really, living on anymore. Or the Martells, I should say. And the Lannisters are on kind of their last legs on people when I think at the end of the story, with I think Cersei being gone, I think Jaime gone, Tyrion probably will be alive. And then maybe we'll have some of the lesser Lannisters still alive at this point. But I think you see how George's theme has always been that war is bad. It is not a good thing. He's very much an anti-war person. He was against Vietnam and all that stuff. I think what the ending has to achieve for George is showing how much the living lose. How, yes, we won, but did we really? That I think is going to be a main conflict for George. And maybe if we also get this thing where we make a peace type pact or whatever with them, what did it cost us for, having this war type stuff, warring all this time before this other big threat was rolling in? What did that cost? So in this video, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video, talking about what's going to be different from the books to the show and how the story is going to finish. I would say the main thing is details. How we get from plot A to plot B, to how this character goes from here to there, how their character evolves. Those are going to be the big things that are going to be different from the books to the show. And if you're watching this and you've never read the books, which I'd be surprised if you're watching this video and you haven't, I would highly recommend them. They're 2 very different means of media, I guess, or content. But when you really look at it, a lot of the same things are similar. If you look at the first 3 books, they are quite similar. There are major things though that are different from each. I think the real big thing where the books to the show is getting to read Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons. I think both those books give us way better content than what was in season 5. So if you've only watched the show, I would definitely recommend the books. They are significantly better. And hopefully they will eventually get finished, which at this point, I would say at the earliest 2025 would be a good spot for that, but who knows at this point. And I hope you guys all enjoy this video. If you guys want me to do an expanded video on this topic, let me know. I could possibly do a stream where we could just kind of talk about kind of a lot of the differences, because I could really sit here for a long time on this topic, but I wanted to make this video kind of shorter because I have a lot of videos I have to do this week, and I will have a test I have to do, so that's kind of why I'm trying to speed these along. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.